This program was recorded on Monday, February 17th, in the year of our Lord 2020. The opinions expressed by the participants in the following program do not necessarily represent that of this station or its management.
Or anybody else.
From the John DeVita Recording Studio, located in an undisclosed and clandestine location on the great northwest side of our fair city of Chicago, we once again are pleased to be presenting yet another edition of our monthly roundtable panel discussion show, Meet the Chicago Historians. Now here's the guy who started it all, John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Richard Lang. From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Meet the Chicago Historians on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Monday, February the 17th, the year 2020. Today, the panel will be talking about several different subjects, including President's Day, which today is President's Day, and of course, much, much more. So sit back and enjoy Meet the Chicago Historians. And now to start today's broadcast, there's our announcer, Mr. Richard Lang.
Now here's today's panel moderator, John S. Cacioppo. John?
Thank you very much, Rich, and welcome one and all to our February edition of Meet the Chicago Historians, a great month of February. Here in the great Chicago metropolitan area, we're glad to have you listening to us today. We'll be here for the next 2.5 hours. Talking about, as John DeVita, our impresario, said, a number of topics. So we're glad to have you here with us on this cold February morning. It is President's Day, and I'll have a few words about that in a moment. But first, let's go around the table and let each of the members of our panelists give you a personal introduction, and we'll start with our stalwart announcer, Rich.
Thank you, John. I am indeed your announcer, Richard Lang. I've got a background in teaching modern European and American history. I've become more and more fascinated by Chicago history, and I'm involved with a group that recreates old-time radio shows. We all remember what radio was. It's like TV without the picture.
So you're sort of the Harry Von Zell of our group, or the Don Wilson of our group.
I'll go for either one. They're both good.
And we'll move across the table, right directly across from our announcer, Rich, our next panelist.
I'm Don Peter from Oak Park, Illinois. I'm a member of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago, and I just want to remember the Father's Day weekend. We have a muster at the Fire Academy.
Very good. Always well worth attending. And moving down to one of our veteran police officers.
Tom McKenna, retired Chicago Police. I was brought into this group by our former moderator, John Jack Red Ryan, whatever name he was going under. I always joked that I'm one of the few people that actually admit to being a friend of his. But I saw John as under the weather, to say the least. I saw him last week. The physical ailments are, I would say, grave, but his personality, as always, is very positive and very optimistic. I've known John all my life, and John was never a complainer in the situation that he was in, or is in. He certainly does have some things to complain about, but that's not him. So keep him in your prayers. I'm a firm believer that prayer works. I've seen it, and I believe in it, and I believe in miracles. And hopefully, in the very near future, John will be back with us.
Very good.
Hope so.
Thank you.
We
send him all of us. We send our best wishes to John, great moderator. He used to go by the name of Red, and we always said that definitely did not reflect his political point of view.
Right.
But we are thinking about you and hope that you're going to be improving and doing better in the days and weeks and months ahead. And now we'll go to another member of the police contingent on our panel. Would you come in and sign in, please, as John Daly used to say?
Thank you, John. I'm Dennis Fitzgerald. I'm a retired Chicago policeman, having served 33 years. And now I find myself, I head up the Police Council of the Knights of Columbus, the only police council in this 138-year-old organization, although our council is approaching its 22nd year. But in this 138-year-old organization, they've acquired 17,500 councils in 14 countries. And believe it or not, there's only one police council. It's here in Chicago, and that's what I head up. And our chaplain is Father Dan Brandt, the police chaplain. He's also our chaplain. So it's a very unique council, and should you ever want to surf in, just go to Knights12173.us. Surf in, take a look at us, and give us a call. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next member of our panel is our representative of the great Chicago Fire Department, balancing off our police contingent. So would you give us a thumbnail sketch of your background, sir?
I don't think we're balanced off that much. Bill Kugelman here, retired from the Chicago Fire Department after 46 years, and was president of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago, where we will have our open house on the 22nd of February from 10 to 2 o'clock, and we are at 5218 Southwestern Avenue. Bring a camera, bring the kids, see what the fire department was like quite some time ago. You'll enjoy it. And been here for a long time. Like Tom says, prayers are needed for our pal, Big Red, and they are. The Chicago Police Mass with Father Dan Brandt, he's mentioned all the time. So, back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Bill. So that's our panel for today. That's our February contingent. My name is Janice Cacioppo. I'm your moderator. I was in public life and politics and government for all of my career, really. I served as town trustee and then town assessor in the town of Cicero. I was state representative for just a short time, just one term down in Springfield. And I've got a police connection. I was chairman of the Police and Fire Committee of the town board for many, many years. That was my primary interest when I was on the town board. I was also commissioner of the auxiliary police force in Cicero. We had a fine auxiliary police unit for a number of years, of which I was quite proud. So I feel comfortable being in this panel with police and fire representatives. And it's good to be with you. We'll be talking, as John DeVita said, about a number of topics. I'd like to just start off with just a brief word about today, which is called President's Day. And I think that is unfortunate. I'm sure people don't know really what this means. Are we honoring all presidents, all 44 men who have served as President of the United States? Is it Washington and Lincoln, whose birthdays fall in the month of February? Actually, if my understanding is correct, officially this is the observance of Washington's birthday. When they changed the holidays to these Monday holidays back in the 1970s, this was actually intended to be Washington's birthday, because Washington's birthday was a federal holiday. Lincoln's birthday never was a federal holiday because for many years so many southern states still did not look completely fondly upon our 14th president. But this is technically the observance of Washington's birthday, but no one knows it by that title. And I think it's unfortunate because Washington was the father of our country. He was our first president, and many would still say our greatest president. There's always a debate as to whether Washington or Lincoln was the greatest. They really stand side by side. They were both tremendous figures. But it would be worthwhile, I think, if we got back to honoring George Washington specifically on this day and calling it Washington's birthday. You know, his birthday moved around. When he was born, the calendar said February the 11th. He was actually born on what was then considered February the 11th because England and its colonies had not yet adopted the new calendar that most of the rest of the world had adopted. Because, and I'm not going to go into the details, but the calendars were out of sync because of leap year and the Earth's rotation and astronomical reasons. But it was only some years after he was born that England finally accepted the new so-called Julian calendar that Julius Caesar had initiated. And for that reason, a number of days were skipped on the calendar. In order to get the two calendars in sync, they had to delete, I believe, 11 days from the calendar. So that's why Washington's birthday jumped from February the 11th to February the 22nd, the day that we all know as his traditional birthday. We all can remember when his actual birthday, February the 22nd, was a national holiday. And now it's just observed on the third Monday in February. But whenever it's marked, George Washington was a towering figure, and we should honor him specifically with a holiday in honor of our first and greatest president. The monument, the great monument in Washington, D.C., the great obelisk, honors him. 555 1/4 feet tall. Tallest point in Washington, D.C. We have a state named in his honor, the only state named in honor of a president of the United States. The nation's capital, Washington, D.C., is named in his honor. So it's good to think of Washington at this time of February and throughout the year. Abraham Lincoln, also born in February 12th. Ronald Reagan, who I think is rising in stature, and I certainly consider one of our nation's greatest presidents, also born in the month of February. And Franklin Roosevelt was born just outside of February, the 30th of January, 1882. So it's ironic, these four great presidents were born within 25 days of each other on the calendar, from January the 30th to February the 22nd. So that's my opening sermon about President's Day and the birthday of George Washington. It's customary at our panel that we take the first half hour, talking about the news of the day. Jack Ryan would always open it up, our great moderator, by talking about those stories that are in the news, and there's been a great deal of news since we were here last month. So would anyone like to kick it off with any views, any thoughts on any subject in the news?
I'll start. The Daytona 500.
Yes.
It's absolutely something that is astonishing to me. For those of you that been in a coma for the last few days, the Daytona 500 NASCAR race, President our president, my president, decided that he was going to attend the Daytona 500. Now, this alone would infuriate the liberals, which is absolutely amazing to me. So not only did he decide to attend when he figured that this is going to drive his liberal opponents insane, and he decided to do a flyover with Air Force One, which is absolutely bizarre. I don't know if anyone saw the footage. Bizarre and unprecedented. And then, if that wasn't enough, he decided to take the presidential limo on a couple laps around the track. Now, this, if that didn't have his liberal left-wing opponents leaping off tall buildings, nothing will.
And not in a single bound.
Right, and I know he did it on purpose, and I think it's a great move, and it got everybody into the game about how outrageous this was. What amazes me is a lot of his opponents don't realize that they are getting played. This was done deliberately to drive him crazy, and the only way you can win that game is not to play. Just if you want to comment on it, say, yeah, I heard that, but I didn't. But they're going insane about he's crazy, and he's not fit to be president, and it's the tweets that President Trump, all the tweets that he does. Everyone, even some of his Republican friends are wishing he'd stop. That's what makes Trump Trump, and they don't understand that he's doing that to drive them crazy, and it's working. And of course, Nancy Pelosi was crazy before Trump got elected, but it's driving her more crazy. And I mean, I've got to hand it to the guy. He's not a politician. He'll never be a politician, even though he got elected president. That's why he does what he does, because the classic politician, they don't make mistakes like that. I remember, being a conservative years ago. Probably the only really major conservative voice we had was William Buckley Jr.
Great man.
And I remember in one of his books he wrote about Rockefeller making a speech, and he kept on using the line, we must cut this and we must cut that and we must go on, and it was just a classic political speech, and Buckley's response to it is we must cut the crap.
I think he was the one that said of Jimmy Carter that Jimmy Carter tried to give a fireside chat, but the fire went out.
Right.
Yeah.
Just for the record, it was the second time the Air Force One did a flyover. Ronald Reagan did one. I think it was in 1980.
Oh, really? At Daytona?
Yeah, I was there.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't
they
know
showed
that.
one Air Force One was landing, and the race cars were passing because the landing strip and the back strip of the speedway are parallel.
Yeah,
and the race cars were going faster than the Air Force One landing.
Well, you were right, Tom, about our president, and he is mine too, very much so. And the United States of America is a business. We're a business, and he's a businessman, and that's what we needed. We don't need any more politicians.
My father always used to say that, it seems like we have the right president for the times through history. Of course, he was dead when Obama got elected, but aside from that, if you look really through history, that pretty pans out, and Trump came along right at the right time. If Hillary would have got elected, which I guess the New York Times thought that she did, but I can't imagine what this country would be like.
One of the real problems we've had for the last more than 3 years now is that the losing side, for maybe one of the few times in American history, simply didn't accept the fact that they had lost. There are those in the leadership of the Democratic Party who simply don't accept the fact that Trump is president. To them, he's not legitimate. It isn't just that they didn't want him to win; they didn't expect him to win. They all thought that Hillary was a lead pipe certainty to win. They were all waiting to celebrate on election night. They had the balloons up in the ceiling and the confetti, and it didn't happen. I mean, they had a barge load of fireworks on the East River ready to shoot off in her honor. And they couldn't believe it. You just had to watch the expressions on those anchors and correspondents. They were dumbfounded.
From the time Trump announced his candidacy till the day he was sworn in, the experts were totally and completely wrong about every. I remember it distinctly from the time. First of all, he would never get the nomination. That was it was impossible. Absolutely, totally, it's out of the question. Don't even think about it. Okay, wrong. Then, at the convention, they said there was absolutely no way he would get the nomination on the first ballot. I remember an expert, I forget what station, I'm going to say CNN, he had all the bells and whistles. He had the whiteboard. He had the background with all the states. He had all the delegates, and he made a very, very convincing argument that there was absolutely no way Donald J. Trump would get the nomination on the first ballot. Impossible. Wrong. Then, when he did get the nomination, on election night, every single expert talked not only about when Hillary wins, but how much he's going to win by. Once again, wrong. And you know what? Most of these same experts are still out there, still making their predictions, and they're still wrong.
On the Sunday before the election, and I remember this vividly, the Sunday morning show this week, the late great David Brinkley had this show for many years, and it was a great program. It's now the much less great George Stephanopoulos is the host of it now. But they were talking about who was going to be in Hillary's cabinet the Sunday before the election. They were talking about who was going to be her Secretary of State and Defense. And finally the host said, well, maybe we ought to put this off until next week. Maybe we ought to discuss who's going to be in Hillary's after she wins the election.
Right.
All you had to do was watch the expressions on election night. They started off bubbling. They were so happy. This was going to be a landslide. And then along about 8:30 Chicago time, 9:30 Eastern time, it began to sink in that this is not going the way it's supposed to. And then they just dragged it out. They wouldn't call the states. There were states that obviously had gone for Trump, and they were 98% of the vote was in, and they still hadn't called the state for Trump.
They refused to call, and a lot of them were almost in tears, thinking that. And talking about George Stephanopoulos, I always thought when he was doing an interview, especially with a Republican, I always thought it would be interesting if he started off the interview by saying, and you are aware of the fact that I've donated $50,000 to Hillary's campaign, just so you know.
Sure.
But that was never brought up because they wanted to paint the picture that they're a totally impartial while donating that kind of money to someone's campaign. It's actually kind of sickening.
And they first began talking about impeachment right after his election. They were already talking about impeachment, I believe, before he had been inaugurated. They were already some of the more whacked out members of the party were talking about impeaching him.
Well, I tell you what, fellas, it's and I totally agree with you. But I don't know, did any of you watch the NBA All-Star game yesterday?
No. Missed it.
No, we're not.
I'm a basketball fan.
I am. I started to play up at Marquette and was the last one. But I like basketball, and I wanted to watch that. As regal as I am in loving basketball, I just about turned it off. They had a gal on there that sang the Canadian national anthem, and she was all right, a young gal on that. And then they had Chaka Khan sing the
Star Spangled Banner,
and I damn near turned the thing off. What a disgrace. An absolute disgrace.
Well, it's a classic example of if the media decides that they're going to promote something, then everybody jumps on the bandwagon. Kobe Bryant, the helicopter crash, tragic. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But they turned him into a saint. I'm thinking this is the same guy that was accused of rape, and then bought the girl off. I mean, this is a hero, and there was not a mention of that anywhere.
Well, Gail King mentioned it on the. I don't know if you knew about it.
Really?
She mentioned. Oh, yeah. Oh, there was a big dust-up over this. She asked a question
she's black,
about it.
She can do it. A white person couldn't.
And they came down on her. One of the celebrities, I forget who it was, attacked her for even mentioning this. And then he backed off. And then he backed off and admitted that it was, in fact, something that was part of the record, and she had every right to bring it up. Oh yeah, she brought this up in an interview and was really taken to task for it, for even mentioning it.
Yeah, well, that's the spin is going to be in their direction and in their favor.
Yeah.
And basically, there's like I say, when I started getting involved in the conservative movement, and I'll tell you, we talked about our moderator, John Ryan. He's the one that really got me involved in it. Because believe it or not, when John and I were in high school and after high school, John was a conservative. I would never really call myself a liberal, but I was a moderate. And then I started getting involved in William Buckley Jr. and I started subscribing to National Review. But now there are a lot of, with the talk show, I listen to almost all of them. But in television, Fox and Friends in the morning. Then you've got Rush Limbaugh, and you've got Sean Hannity. You've got Laura Ingraham. There's so many now that actually, you can get some information that isn't mainstream liberal.
It's not biased.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
No, I listened to that 89 or 890 on the radio, and to all of those people. There's a couple of new guys now too on there, and they're all very good. They tell it like we would like to tell it.
Plus the thing is, the latest controversy with Rush and Mayor Pete is Rush made a statement that's absolutely true, that the black community, especially older black people, are not really pro-homosexual. They say that the proposition that was defeated in California was defeated by black churches. And as a matter of fact, when I was working at the Field Museum, a gay friend was very upset. As a matter of fact, he made comments to some of the blacks that worked at the field. Yeah, it's because of you that whatever the proposition was in California was defeated, and they say one of the reasons. So anyway, the point that Rush made is that Pete kissing his husband, I guess, and my thing, God bless him, but that is not going to fly very well in the fundamentalist church, and especially black churches in South Carolina. But again, they spun that into Rush is a homophobe and Rush is anti-gay, and he never ever said that.
Well, of course, they're still furious over the fact that the president honored him at the State of the Union and gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and then awarded it to him right there on national television at the State of the Union in the Capitol building itself. This has to be absolutely infuriating to the hard left.
And then Nancy, they say, I forget who said it, but it was going around on the internet. If you can't impeach, then rip up the speech.
Yeah, in fact, I meant, it's funny, I came today, I had some notes of topics that I wanted to discuss today, but unfortunately Nancy Pelosi tore them up. so I don't have them here with me today, but
But I mean, what I mean, God, if you had a child that did something like that, you'd send them to their room. I mean, what a little spoiled...
Can you imagine what the media would have said if Paul Ryan had torn up Barack Obama's State of the Union address with a scowl on his face and doing it, obviously for the cameras, doing it up front so that everyone can see what is being done? Can you imagine what would have been said about it, or if Newt Gingrich had torn up Bill Clinton's State of the Union address? Neither of them obviously would have done that. It would never even have occurred to them to do it. But think what would have happened if a Republican had done that to Barack Obama.
Well, there are those that say it's a historical document.
It is.
And it's a valid point.
Well, if you see it,
it truly is.
This is not just a Xerox copy that you could see. This was
property.
this was like parchment. This was a very stiff document.
Yeah, it was signed by Trump too.
Which is something that I think goes into the archives. Every speech, one is given to the Speaker of the House, the other one for the Senate goes to the Vice President.
I'm sure.
And she tore it up, and like you say, this is the sort of thing you expect from a 5-year-old child
Right.
in
as
kindergarten.
opposed to when Obama gave the State of the Union, Nancy was like she needed pom-poms, really. She was like a high school cheerleader. Everything every other line, she jumped up and applauded.
And we're coming up on the end of our first half hour. This is Meet the Chicago Historians. Let's hear from our announcer, Rich Lang.
Now for a brief intermission. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians.
Just for your...
Well, friends, when we opened today's program, we said that today was Monday, February the 17th. And, of course, it's still a little on the chilly side outside. It's cold. It's only going to get up into the 30s. And, of course, we got the month of March, which weather can be iffy one way or the other. But come the month of April. And at that time, we could get into some bad, rainy weather. And, of course, you want to check your roof, siding, and gutters, that when the rainy season comes in, and from what I've heard on all the news and all the newscasts and weather forecasts, and we're supposed to have another wet spring like we did last year. And now is the time to think about the roof, siding, and gutters on your home. You don't want mold or mildew in your crawl space, or you don't want drip, drip, drip on the ceilings in your rooms. So get prepared and be ready for the rainy season. And you can do that by calling Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. Mike Besh will drive over in his shiny red pickup truck with ladders on top, and he'll inspect your roof, siding, and gutters and go from there. So once again, be prepared for the rainy season. April is not that far away, and you want to be ready in case of bad weather. Again, you don't want mildew or mold in your crawl space or attic, or you don't want drip, drip, drip on the ceiling in your home. You don't want to be laying in bed and have rain dripping on your forehead. Ha ha, do I hate that. But anyways, give Mike a call. Mike Best Brothers Roofing at area code 630-616-1359. Again, Mike will drive over in his shiny red truck with ladders on top, and he'll look it over, look at your roof, look at your siding, look at your gutters, and give you a free estimate and go from there. So don't have double expense. Call Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters for a free estimate at 630-616-1359. That's Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. Call today for a free estimate.
Now back to our special President's Day edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. John?
Thank you very much, Rich. This is President's Day. We've been talking about President Trump. I'd like to just toss an item out, and this is something that is worthwhile to note, and that is that Donald J. Trump is the first president in American history who never held government office of any kind before his election to the presidency. He was never a governor. He was never a senator or a congressman. He was never a general or other officer in the Army. And virtually all of our previous presidents held positions of that type or served in the cabinet. The closest parallel you can find to Donald Trump would be Herbert Hoover, who never held elective office, never served in the Army, but he was Secretary of Commerce under Harding and Coolidge, and he had served in the Wilson administration as well. He had held appointed offices in government, including cabinet-level appointment.
Right.
Donald Trump is the first president in American history whose entire career was in private life, in private business, and was a tremendous success in that. And I'm not in any way saying that this anyway detracts from him. I mentioned Abraham Lincoln. Arguably our greatest president, certainly stands beside Washington as one of our two greatest presidents. His political career, the highest office he ever held was congressman. One 2-year term in the House of Representatives, and a few terms in the Illinois General Assembly. Never even made it to the state Senate. He was in the House. So he had very, very sparse public office prior to becoming president. So simply having a resume doesn't make you automatically a great president.
Well, plus what's so amazing about Donald Trump's election is not only was he running against the Democratic Party, he was running against his own party, all the old Jeb Bush and that whole bunch, and running against the media.
That's right.
The media actually despised him, and he beat all of them. I mean, it's really an amazing story.
If you run as a Republican, you're going to have virtually all of the news media against you, except for Fox News and talk radio. You're going to have the whole entertainment industry against you. And that affects politics because of these so-called late-night comics who get a platform 5 nights a week. CBS and ABC gives a platform 5 nights a week to a liberal Democrat to ridicule Trump and belittle Trump. You got the whole academic world against you, all the professors, all these experts that we see on the news, professor from Harvard University, the dean from Yale, they're all left Democrats. So when you're a Republican, you're not just fighting the Democratic Party, but all these other auxiliary arms that the Democratic Party has.
And when the media turns on you, Donald Trump, let's just for sake of argument, has been in the news for 40 years. I mean, he had I think the top-rated television show in The Apprentice. Very, very well-known. Before he announced his candidacy, and I'm asking and I ask this of everyone that we get in the conversation about Donald Trump, did you ever hear before he announced for the presidency of him being called a racist?
No.
Never.
Of course not.
Not as a matter of fact, it was probably the direct opposite. They show photographs of all the awards he got from Jewish organizations, black organizations. A good analogy of that, and I think we talked about this before, and John, I think you knew him, Bernie Epton.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When Bernie was in we
House
talked
of
about
Representatives.
this, when he was in the House, he was like the liberal, the black loving rep from Hyde Park.
He was probably considered the most liberal member of the
absolutely.
Of the Republican Party.
And then he runs against Harold Washington, and guess what? The media turned him into a racist, and he felt terrible about that. And I talked to his brother, the judge. I had to drive him somewhere, and we talked about it too. He felt terrible about that.
And I can't claim that Bernie and I were close. Bernie Epton, not the other Bernie that we have these days. I can't claim that we were close friends, but I did get to know him. I had some nice conversations with him. He was a terrific guy.
Yeah.
He was a very distinguished guy. You have the same thing really with Michael Dershowitz, who was looked upon as a very liberal legal scholar until he had the bad taste to say, Trump is right.
Right.
He has the power to do this. And he's been attacked and reviled now. I'm sure that he is on the the don't call list for the entire left. But it just goes to show how you can have an entire career, but if you have the bad taste to disagree with the left on anything, you're out. You're immediately taken to task.
Gentlemen, there's something else I like to stick my 2 cents in. I every night I listen to the 9 o'clock news on Channel 9, and then when they go off at 10 o'clock, I turn on Channel 5 and listen to their news until 10:30, just before I go to bed. I did not get a chance to watch the opening ceremonies of the All-Star game, which I wanted to, but unfortunately at the time that the opening ceremonies of the All-Star game Sunday night, last night, came on, I'm a great lover of the big band music, and 7 o'clock every Saturday and Sunday night on Channel 21 from Indiana, they have the Lawrence Welk Show. And I'm a very, very dear fan of Lawrence Welk. But during the newscast, when I'm trying to get it, during the newscast, I understand that at Sen High School, which is up on the north side of Chicago, up near Rogers Park area, they had some kind of a doings, from what I understand, and some student refused to stand for the American flag or for the Star Spangled Banner and whatever, and the teacher told that student to go back to the country he came from. Now this teacher rather, her job is on the borderline. She could be fired for saying, go back to the country you came from. What aggravates me, gentlemen, it's the people of Chicago that are paying taxes dearly for the teachers in public schools in the city of Chicago. This individual is going to cost this teacher her job, or his job, whatever. I don't know if it's a male or female. Now, if the people in the city of Chicago are paying the teacher's salary, and she had told this individual to go back to the country, that person should not be allowed in this country if she cannot respect our flag or our American way of doing things. I think it's absolutely wrong of the public school system to take this and threaten this teacher that she's going to be fired for saying that. It's the same thing with this football player. Years ago, or a couple years ago, whenever it was, wouldn't stand for the national anthem. Or like you said, Bill, the person that sang the Star Spangled. I didn't see it because, like I said, I was watching Lawrence Welk. I didn't see it, but I have seen some of these programs or some of these sports events where they have the Star Spangled Banner. They have these people that don't even know how to spell the word "the," let alone sing our anthem. We have great American singers that can sing the anthem or sing "God Bless America" or "Till We Meet Again" or whatever. It's a shame that this incident had to happen with this teacher. That person, if we were to go to Canada or to Europe or to any one of those foreign countries, and they played their anthem, and Americans sat down, holy hell would raise. You wouldn't do that in Canada because Trudeau would make sure you got back on the next flight back to where you came from. And I think that saying that the taxpayers of the city of Chicago pay for this teacher, and she told this person to go back where they came from, I think she's right, and I would stand up for that person 100%. Now it's up to you people to comment on what I just said.
John, I couldn't agree more, and that's what's so frustrating about things, and that's one of the reasons why Donald J. Trump is our president, because people in this country are so upset. You hear the comment, well, it's a nation of immigrants. We're all immigrants. Well, first of all, that isn't true. We are not all immigrants. That's number one. Number two, our ancestors, my grandparents, they came to this country because they wanted to be Americans. They wanted to be part of the United States of America. They wanted to be American citizens. They didn't want to speak the language of the country they came from. They didn't want to turn America into the country that they came from. They wanted to be American citizens. The immigrants today, legal and illegal, come here, and the first thing they want to do is change the country into, I forget who was it. Was it Trump that said they wanted to change the country into the shithole that they came from? I think wasn't that one of his comments?
No.
But it's true. So you are comparing, when you attempt to make that comparison, you are comparing apples and oranges. The flying of a foreign country's flag. The only place, and it's interesting because I go to Washington D.C. every year. The only place that you can fly a foreign flag without flying the flag of the United States at the same height with the equal size is in a foreign embassy.
An embassy, because that's technically
So that's why
their
when,
territory.
if you're wandering around Washington D.C. and you see a flag of a foreign country being flown and the American flag isn't next to it, then you know it's their embassy.
I remember my mother talking about the fact that her father, whom I never knew because he died when my mother was a child, and I think about this because my mother's birthday was just a few weeks ago, January the 19th. My mother always said that her father was most proud carrying the American flag in a parade. He belonged to an organization, and he got the assignment of carrying the Stars and Stripes in a parade. And he was so proud of that, having been born in Europe, naturalized citizen in the United States. And remember, she said that he would take them, and these are early memories because he died when she was like 7 or 8 or 9 years old. But he remembers they would go to the cemetery and he would buy little American flags. Each one of them would take a small American flag to take to the cemetery to put on the graves of their family members who had come to America earlier. But that was the attitude, and I'm sure that's true of all of our forebears, whether it's our grandparents, great-grandparents. They came to this country because they loved America. They had heard about America
Right,
and
yeah.
wanted to become Americans.
Absolutely.
And leave behind. They were coming here because they knew what they would have here was going to be far better than what they were leaving behind.
Well, supposedly the story talking about carrying the American flag. One of my favorite stories is in the Olympics when it was in England, the Parade of Nations, and I believe it was a Irish foreign-born. I think he was a shot putter, was carrying the American flag, and it was always a tradition to dip the flag when you passed in front of the king or the head of state of whatever country was hosting the Olympics. And this Irishman didn't dip the American flag in front of the king. Now, there are two stories of why not. The one story is that when he was questioned by why you didn't dip the flag, his comment was, "This flag dips to no earthly king." The other story that I kind of think is more true is other Irish members of the team told him, "You dip that flag in front of that king and you're going to be in the hospital tomorrow." So choose whichever story you like. But again, it's true about how proud they were,
And you know that story was repeated in 1936 when they had the Parade of Nations before Schicklgruber, when the Olympics were held in Berlin. And of course, every nation's flag dips to the head of state, including the British Union Jack, the French tricolor, every one, the custom, except the Stars and Stripes, which never dips to anyone or anything. And it is said that Hitler began stamping his feet and throwing a fit, saying these Americans are insulting me. Goering, it is said, had to try to calm him down because Goering knew the custom that the Americans don't. He's supposed to have said they don't dip their flag to anyone. They don't even dip their flag to President Roosevelt. So
Right.
that was supposed to mollify Schicklgruber, but that is a custom.
But that's just one of the small things that makes this country great and separates it from countries around the world. And that's something that I don't believe that President Obama understood. President Obama was bowing. He was almost apologetic that he was an American president.
Right.
Well, he went on what they called an apology tour. He gave a number of speeches in which he was supposedly apologizing for things that had happened long before he was president, and he had no role or voice in, and no one had asked him really for his apology on any of these subjects anyway.
But then again, he was raised by a communist, I believe, wasn't it? Or his second father was, I think, could have been a communist also. But, gentlemen, if I can add, I listened to this TV program, OAN, One American News Network, OANN. And on their intermissions, frequently they'll quote portions of the Constitution or valued words of presidents. And I believe it was President Roosevelt that and very eloquently stated that it's the responsibility of every new arrival, to learn the Pledge of Allegiance, to learn the customs, and to learn the respect for the flag. And how on earth could those words have fallen by the wayside? I mean, it's still a valued statement in these new arrivals. But you see, as we referenced earlier in the broadcast, the educational system keeps their students uninformed, and naive, and hence they have these rallies and against the flag, and I don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance and everything. They know nothing. Maybe I'm inclined to think they know very little about our history and how unique we are. This experiment, this fragile experiment, But OANN. I believe it's a relatively new TV station.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
They did a surveys. You're talking about colleges and college professors' surveys about their political affiliations, and it's actually shocking.
Oh.
Some schools, there wasn't one faculty member that identified as conservative. Not one. But these are the same organizations that promote diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Well, they promote diversity in everything except thought. They want lockstep uniformity of thought their way.
Right.
But in all the categories that don't mean that much, your race, your gender, then they want diversity of all that. But everyone has to think the way they think, or you're out.
And if you don't agree with them, you're a racist.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
get back to the flag on ships. The country of origin always goes on the back, and the country they go into goes on the front. And that's pretty well, even to this day, adhered to, especially with Canada. Because you go in Lake Calumet or the Calumet River, and you see ore ships and stuff like that. And most of the time, 90% of the time, they'll have an American flag on the front and a Canadian flag on the rear.
Here's a little known fact about flags. When Texas was admitted to the Union, of course, Texas came into the Union having been an independent country for a short time, because as we all know, with Davy Crockett and Travis and Jim Bowie at the Alamo, Texas won its independence from Mexico, and then it was the Republic of Texas with its own flag, the Lone Star flag, the red, white, and blue flag with one star. When Texas became a state of the United States, part of the congressional legislation permitted the Texas flag to fly beside the stars and stripes on all public buildings and public places in the state of Texas. I don't know that state flags were that common in the early 19th century, the mid-19th century. Texas had its own flag, and they wanted it provided that you could fly the Texas flag beside the American flag on all public buildings. Now, today we take that for granted. You go downtown, you see the Stars and Stripes, the state of Illinois, the county flag, the Chicago flag. But at that time, they wanted a provision that they loved their state flag, and they wanted to be able to continue to fly it in front of their capitol and their other public buildings.
Their state flag is now the Texas flag, state of Texas.
That's right.
But that was the
the Lone Star
original
flag.
country flag, right?
That was the flag when it was the Republic of Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
And even when you're flying flags, isn't it the American flag always goes, as you're looking at, always goes to the left?
On your left, what they say is its own right. The flag is considered to be a person. In the flag code, it's treated as if it's a person, a living thing. And so if you have a row of flags, it has to be on its own right, which is our left as you're looking at it.
Right.
That's why the president always has the flag to his right and the presidential flag to his left. There's a whole, rules and regulations about the America treats its flag with much greater reverence than most countries do. I mean, most countries don't have this elaborate ritual surrounding the flag that we do in the United States.
Getting back to media bias, Barack Obama was generally acknowledged by the media as the smartest
Greatest man that ever lived.
Smartest president.
Yeah.
There are not enough accolades in the English language. As a matter of fact, I think every accolade has been used to describe President Obama. Now,
Do you remember anything that he ever said or did that the media said was controversial?
no.
I don't.
No.
But that word is used about every word that comes from the mouth of Donald Trump, every decision he makes, and another controversial decision. President Trump today.
But here's the thing. Now, here's a man that is acknowledged by the media to be the smartest president. I mean, forget it. Thomas Jefferson was an idiot compared to Barack Obama. Okay, now they hate Donald Trump. Now here's the question. What is Barack Obama? Again, now bearing in mind, this is the smartest man.
Greatest man that ever lived.
What's he doing now? I mean, this is the smart. I mean, he's got to be like CEO of, or he has his own corporation. I mean, he's the smartest man. What's he doing now?
Hillary
Nothing.
Clinton was the smartest woman who ever lived.
Yeah.
I mean, they
but
treated
but
her.
but Donald Trump is a disgrace. As Bernie says, Trump is a disgrace. But Donald Trump's a billionaire. Now, what's wrong with this?
Well, this is one of the problems that I have, is the way our politics has been coarsened in recent years. You hear, for one thing, they always simply refer to him as Trump. You almost never hear anyone on the left call him President Trump. The media calls him simply Trump. I was on a radio show downtown when Barack Obama was president, and the first time I referred to him, I said President Obama. The second or third time, I simply said Obama, and the liberal on the panel, oh, you have to show him the respect of his office. You should use. It went on and on about how I should use this title. They never do that with Trump, and you hear all this talk. We must defeat Trump in order to save our democracy. Who talks like that? I don't remember Republicans saying that about Democratic presidents, that it was going to be the end of the world if this man was reelected, or if the kid. We've got this apocalyptic view now that if we're not elected, the whole world is going to slide into disaster.
All the predictions, Obama, well, there's no way that Trump is going to turn the economy around. What has he got, a magic wand? Then, when Trump did turn the economy around, Obama takes credit for it.
It was all thanks to Obama.
Yeah, it was
all
yeah.
thanks to Obama.
So go figure it out. The stock market was going to crash. Remember those predictions?
And the 8 dismal years that we had under Barack Obama, well, that was all Bush's fault. That was all because of Bush. Obama had nothing to do with it. It took 8 years for his policies to kick in when Trump became president. Now it's all thanks to him.
They just ignore when they're wrong. It just they pay no reference to it at all. Somebody should do a tally of just how often, how many times are they wrong, time and time again.
It's like when Obama spoke about the economy. I would ask people. I said, on what basis does Obama have to speak with any authority about the economy in this country? I mean, did he study it? I mean, I know he was an attorney, but I mean, what's his background to talk? I mean, other than the biggest thing, I'll make this fast, when he talked about increasing the capital gains tax. They had lowered it, and he wanted to increase it. And every single economist said that's not the way it works. The way I simplify this is I say, if you had a nightclub, and you were charging $20 at the door, and no one was coming in, do you think you should increase it to $30 to get more people, or do you think you should lower it to $10 and get more people? Well, obvious you lower it and you get more people. But when they question him about that, about it wouldn't be a good idea, you know what he said? Well, it's not fair. It's not fair. See?
Well, time and time again in our history, presidents who have cut taxes have produced an economic boom. Reagan cut taxes. I can remember the left saying it was going to be the end of civilization as we know it, and we had the longest boom in American history all through the 80s. It stretched into the 90s. You had that little recession when Bush Sr. was president, and that defeated him. And it was one of the shortest recessions in history, and it quickly the economy righted itself. And now Trump put through another enormous tax cut, and again the economy is roaring. And you hear people saying that he should be thrown out of office because they have to try to find some way to say that the economy is bad. Well, it's not being evenly divided. Rich people are getting richer.
Well, they predicted for a while. They were predicting a recession, and there was no evidence whatsoever that was going to be. But just the negative messaging.
Well, like Bill said earlier too, the country, it's a business. It's a huge, massive business, and this businessman not a non-politician, this businessman. Look at the statesman that he turned out to be. Look at the his State of the Union address. Look at when he first started meeting in the Middle East, Far East, meeting with 55 different Muslim countries, 55 countries, and very stately, and they respected him, but just time and time again, he's just setting records off the charts. But they don't see this. How on earth can they get by with ignoring it? It's so obvious to,
Calvin Coolidge, whom Ronald Reagan greatly admired, said the business of America is business.
There you go.
That's right.
So you're thinking alike. And with that, we'll go to our announcer because we're coming to the end of our second half hour.
Well, here, let me get this right away. Chaka Khan's national anthem performance at the NBA All-Star Game gets roasted on Twitter. Chaka Khan's rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner was so long that players walked away before she even finished. So that's made the...
Was she ad-libbing or something, changing?
I blame the authorities of these sports leagues for not establishing at the outset how to sing the national anthem. Rich?
You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians, and we thank you for it. We'll be right back.
Trump, I find fault with him, is
Hello, friends. Are you looking for a place to have some printing done? Well, I have the right place for you to go, and that is the printing store in Oak Park, Illinois. Call or see Phil Berry at 621 Madison Street or call 708-383-3638. Phil Berry will sit down with you and help you plan whatever you need printed. Now his products are brochures, booklets, business cards, catalogs, envelopes, letterheads, flyers, invitations, newsletters, notepads, menus, mailers, manuals, labels, posters, postcards, price list, NCR forms, sale sheets, table tents, pocket folders, and presentation forms. And he also has 1 to 4 color offset printing, digital copying, high-speed copying, graphic designs, typesetting, laminating, foil stamping, die cutting, and imprinting. And his complete bindery service includes booklets, cutting, scoring, folding, numbering, padding, and drilling. So once again, for all your printing needs, call or see Phil Berry at the printing store at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. They are located at Madison Street and Clarence, just east of Oak Park Avenue. And that's at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or give Phil Berry a call at 708-383-3638. For all your printing needs, the printing store is there to help you. They're 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois. And once again, you can call Phil Berry at 708-383-3638.
Now, back to our show. John?
Thank you very much, Rich. We should do this maybe one more time. Let's go around the table, let everyone introduce themselves, and I'll begin once again with our announcer.
I'm your announcer, Rich Lang, with some teaching background in European and American history.
I'm Don Peter. I'm still a member of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago.
And proud of it.
Right, sorry.
Tom McKenna, retired Chicago police officer.
And I'm Dennis Fitzgerald, retired Chicago police officer, and currently heading up the Knights of Columbus Police Council. And if I can take an extra moment or two, we're going to be celebrating our 22nd anniversary on the 14th of March at a very nice facility called Mayfield Banquets at Archer in Austin. And our man of the year, if you recognize this name, is Nick Spazzato. What a public servant he is. Former fireman for 18 years, active duty, and recent years he served as the alderman of the 36th Ward and currently the alderman of the 38th Ward. He's going to be our man of the year, along with other honorees, Ralph DiBartolo, if that rings a bell, and Tommy Minnesota, and Mike and Marcia Schumacher, for humanitarians for all their years of dedicated service to NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Health, and it was via their efforts and all that, it instituted a program in the Chicago Police Academy as officers confront different problems on the street with mental illness, encountering people with mental illness. So to that point, should that strike your interest, please surf into our website at nights12173, nights12173.us, and you'll find out all the information there. John?
Thank you very much, and I'm Janice Cacioppo, and I'm your host of Meet the Chicago Historians. We're here on President's Day, the third Monday in February, honoring George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, certainly our two greatest presidents. And talking about presidents, we've talked a good deal about Donald Trump. I'd just like to share this with you. We've all perhaps followed the impeachment controversy that was taking place for some weeks and months. And I just came across this fact. There was a great deal of discussion over the procedure that Mitch McConnell adopted in the Senate. And I'd personally like to have a tip of the hat to Mitch McConnell, who I thought handled that matter superbly. But Democrats were very upset. And Adam Schiff said that he remembered that it was done differently when Bill Clinton was impeached. And Jerry Nadler objected because he remembered that it had been done differently when Richard Nixon was impeached. And Nancy Pelosi particularly objected because she remembered it had been done differently when Andrew Johnson was impeached.
Ooh, there's a dig.
Well,
Very
she
good.
About not quite 80 years old, but she's getting up there
getting
too,
there.
isn't it?
Here's another little sidelight. This has been something that's been occurring to me. Bernie Sanders, the socialist candidate for president, and bear in mind, Bernie Sanders has never been elected to the Senate as a Democrat. I don't believe he was a mayor in, I think, Burlington, Vermont, and I don't believe he ran as a Democrat then. I don't believe he has ever, other than when he runs for president, has ever labeled himself a Democrat. He is a socialist. But Bernie Sanders, I believe, is today 78 years old.
Mm-hmm.
If he were elected president next year, God forbid, he would be 79. Now, bear in mind, Ronald Reagan was our oldest president, oldest man to have served as president. When he left office in 1989, that following February, a few weeks after he left office in 1989, he turned 78 years old. So he was still technically 77 when he was serving on his final day in the White House. He was born in 1911. So Bernie Sanders, if he became president, would be older on the day of his inauguration than Ronald Reagan, the oldest president in American history, was the day he left office.
Unbelievable.
If Sanders were to serve a single term, he would be 83 in his final years.
Mm-hmm.
And we always say the presidency is the greatest public office on earth, the most powerful office on earth, the most important office on earth. The responsibilities are enormous. I mean, for years, they would show pictures of you've seen the pictures of FDR, his first inauguration, his second, and you can see the deterioration. He was only 63. When FDR died, he was, I believe, 63. Yes, he was born in 1882. He was 63 years old.
And he looked like he was 80.
And he looked horrible. But again, he'd been through a world war and a depression. And I'm a great admirer of FDR. But the point is, do we really think the responsibilities of the presidency can be discharged by a man 81, 2, or 3 years old? It is something to think about. Reagan bumped it considerably because before Reagan was elected, Dwight Eisenhower had been the oldest president. And Reagan, in his first year, reached an age where he was older than Ike was when Ike left office. The same sort of thing I'm talking about. Ike left office. He had just turned 70. He had turned 70 a few weeks earlier.
Well, John, I'm not worried about it because if Bernie gets elected, last week I heard that he has thoughts of asking Hillary to run as vice president. So if Bernie gets elected and dies, we've got to look forward to President Hillary Clinton, which he should have deserved. Because
And you
she
could
won.
raise the same age issue
You know,
about Biden, too.
while we're,
Biden's close, yeah.
while we're on that subject about Hillary, Hillary should have been elected because she got the popular vote. I got to ask you this: how smart were our founding fathers to incorporate the Electoral College into the Constitution?
Another example of
it
divine intervention.
It shocked
Our
me, didn't it?
founding
yeah.
fathers,
Sure.
first of all, our founding fathers never used the word democracy.
No.
You won't find the word democracy in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, because in those days democracy meant show of hands, who should be president,
Right.
majority. They did not want that. To them, the president had to be a national figure, and that meant he had to be elected state by state. They wanted the states to play a role in the election of the president, and not just a simple popular vote, highest number of votes wins. They would never have agreed to that arrangement. During the impeachment, everyone was quoting Alexander Hamilton, as if Hamilton wanted to restrict the power of the presidency. Hamilton wanted the president to serve for life. He wanted the president to be elected once and then to serve for the rest of his life. And then when that president died, then he would be succeeded by another president. Hamilton believed the president's power should be enormous. But the main point is the Electoral College is there because the Founding Fathers, they did not want the direct election of the president. They didn't want Congress to pick the president. There were proposals that said, well, let the Congress choose. No, they didn't want that. They wanted a system where the voters would be involved, but it wouldn't be direct popular vote. And that's how you get the Electoral College, state by state, so that a president has to have a national mandate. You don't just, in our terms, go to New York City and Los Angeles and Chicago and pile up the votes, and that's how you become
Absolutely.
president.
People that don't understand the Electoral College, an analogy that I like to use is if you are a conservative Republican living in Carbondale, Illinois, I'm sure you're not thrilled that every statewide office is elected by one county in the state. And that's what it would be, because if they did away with the Electoral College, then you would be a conservative Republican living in Oklahoma, and the president would be elected just exactly what you said by the coasts.
And here's another thing. They make fun. Well, Trump didn't win the popular vote. Trump, he carried the popular vote in a sufficient number of states to win the Electoral College. I mean, he got Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan because he won the popular vote in those states. He carried the cumulative popular vote in 49 of the 50 states. Leave California out, total up the other 49. Trump is still ahead. He has a popular vote majority. Now, add in 56 of California's 57 counties. Trump is still in the lead in the popular vote. Hillary Clinton's popular vote majority can be accounted for in one county of one state, Los Angeles County, California.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where she piled up a plurality of 3 or 3.5 million votes. And I remind you, Los Angeles County includes Hollywood.
Right.
Do we really want a president picked by Hollywood?
And the thing is, people that don't understand it, Trump even joked about it once when they were talking about how do you respond that you didn't win the. He says it's the election. He says why the hell do you think I campaigned in Rhode Island? But people don't get it. But once it's correctly explained to them, I think they say, well, you know what? That is really that was really a
genius move.
Yeah, a genius move. And like I say, in our state, in Illinois, what are there? 144 counties, I think. You can get elected.
Well over 100.
101. 101 or
Oh,
it's
is it?
100. It's
Yeah,
101.
And you can get elected by just winning one county.
Cook County, yeah.
Right.
And that's what they want to turn the presidency into,
Yeah, and that's when you get down south. I know. I tell people, I say, look on a map. I said, Southern Illinois borders on Kentucky. I said, what do you think the people down there think of being controlled? The state being controlled by Cook County Democrats.
And Southern Illinois is more southern than it is Illinois.
Oh yeah, right. Yep,
You know,
Hence
John.
the occasional moves to divide up the state.
absolutely.
To secede.
Yeah, you know, John, as you were talking about Bernie Sanders, I heard this morning on the Dan Proft show. Very good. I enjoy listening to him in the early morning hours. But I believe he referenced that Bernie Sanders never spoke against Venezuela in the Maduro administration. We were talking about being a socialist. never.
him.
It's not recorded that he's ever spoke against Cuba. Of course, we know he honeymooned in Russia. So, do people really know his?
Well,
I don't know that
they
Bernie
will-
Sanders
they
ever
will.
spoke against Lenin or Stalin.
He did speak in favor of Fidel Castro. They've got that on tape.
Well, yeah.
What I like to add when everyone says, well, at least Bernie is an admitted socialist, and I said, yes, he's an admitted socialist, but he's an actual communist.
Yeah.
I mean, in actuality,
Yeah.
I mean that's his plan. But there's so many, the economy and wealth is not a zero-sum game. If you have $1 million and I have no dollars, taking your $1 million in taxes means you're going to be as broke as I am. I'm not getting any of that.
That's why class warfare has never really worked in the United States. We've never had that kind of hatred. It exists in other parts of the world. It exists in parts of the world where really you don't have an opportunity to get ahead, where the rich are there permanently because they're connected to the boss that's in power. You get rich by being tied in with the guy that's in the presidential palace. But in this country, everybody always has this sense, if I can make a success, and if not me, my kid can make a success.
John, absolutely. Because, like you said, people look around, you may be broke, but you can look at someone that invented the pet rock and made $1 million and say, you know what? I got to come up with something like that too. And people do it every day.
I always like to use the example, one of my heroes, Henry Ford. I mean, Henry Ford, he had some weird ideas, I admit, but here's a man that started out as just an ordinary mechanic, and he becomes the richest man in the world. Becomes maybe the first billionaire, maybe the first true billionaire in American history. And it happened here in America. Because he was smarter and had you can't. It wasn't because he cheated. He didn't break the law. He didn't inherit money from his father. He did it with his own brains and initiative and hard work. And there are any number of other people, maybe haven't done it on the scale of Henry Ford, but have made successes of themselves in the same way because they had the brains, the drive, and the initiative to do it. And we don't want to punish that. We want to do away with that and punish it by taking the money away from the people who are successful.
What other country is there that all others look up to just for the chance of getting ahead? I mean, are there other countries? Oh, I want to get there instead of here. I mean, you can do it if it can be done. You can do it in America.
Well, plus, I saw an interview with the president, I believe, founder of Home Depot, and he said, talking again about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and all the rest of them, he said, you can take all of my money and all of the other billionaires' money and lump together, they cannot pay for what they're talking about. And the thing is, why student loan forgiveness? How about mortgage forgiveness? Well, if they got past that, I'd vote for it. I mean, why to select this group of people? And the other thing is, hey, you took out the loan, you signed for the loan, pay the loan.
Let me, if I can interject this. You talk about goofy things proposed. Supposedly, my son told me, my son's in his mid-30s, and he's quite the mechanic and all that, by virtue of his hobbies and all that. But he said he had heard that California is going to pass a law that you cannot work on your car. And he said the reason being is because they want to phase out gas combustion cars. Additionally, he went on to say, it's unbelievable, he went on to say that they're going to prohibit the average guy from buying certain mechanical tools. They would be relegated. Because you can't work on your car. So they would be relegated to the garages. So I know, you shake your head. But if it were to happen, of course it would happen in California. That's craziness.
They used to talk about the People's Republic of Massachusetts. Now it's the People's Republic of California.
Never say never.
Or the People's Republic of Oak Park.
Yeah. Wow, only when you think you've heard everything and then you hear something new from California. But,
And there's a bit of a move now to go back to self-service gasoline stations.
Yes.
I've heard that.
too.
I have heard that, yes.
to have attendants
You have to have
attendants pump your
attendants on
gas.
duty all the time.
Some guy
But are they
from
going to have to wear
Illinois.
bow ties, and are they going to have to sing the Texaco
Oh, yeah,
theme
well,
song like they did in the old
salute to you.
Check your air pressure and your oil.
They do your windshields.
Yeah.
That was quite the time.
Tomorrow-
We're the men from Texaco. We
Wasn't
were-
with
it-
Maine to Mexico. Tomorrow we'll be servicing your car.
Should I
Wasn't
check
that
your oil, sir?
introduced somewhere in the Illinois?
Yeah.
In the Illinois?
So some
Somebody-
I think it's in Oak Park.
There are
Person
proposals for
proposed,
requiring
yeah.
you to have attendants that would pump the gas.
Right.
Doing away
Well,
with self-service.
There's some.
Yeah, if they wear the bow ties and the uniforms, I might be in favor of that.
There's some station that does that, but they'll charge you 50 cents a gallon to pump gas.
Wow. Yeah, but they don't realize the end result of it. I mean, just what'll that'll affect the price of the gallon of
You
gas.
remember that as a kid when the guy would come up
Yeah.
and ask if
Oh, yeah.
shall I check your oil, sir? And
check the oil. the
Familiar
water.
ding as you drove over the.
the little cord
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
bell that you ran. Yeah,
Yeah, but the guy would short stick down the oil so he could sell you another quart of oil.
Yeah. And that great scene in "It's a Mad, Mad World" with Arnold Stang and who is his partner? Arnold Stang, the two little guys that are opening the grand opening of their gas station.
Oh, yeah.
And Jonathan Winters demolishes it. He destroys the entire place. The last thing is he knocks down the water tower and all their water comes crashing down.
It's always a fun movie.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the topic was presidents and all that. I just heard it the other day. So I guess the President Tyler had 15 kids in a huge family with two wives. I don't, but 15 kids, and that was noteworthy. I just thought I'd inject that, put that out.
That was the days before television.
Tyler was an important president in history for this reason. He was the first vice president to succeed because he was the second half of Tippecanoe and Tyler II, the most famous slogan in American history. Tippecanoe was William Henry Harrison, who at the time was the oldest president in American history. He took the oath of office in sleet, kind of the weather we were predicting for today, rain, cold, and sleet, without wearing a top hat, without wearing a top coat, because he wanted to show what a strong, vigorous guy he was, because he was the Whigs' answer to Andy Jackson. He was the man of the West. He was the tough guy. He catches pneumonia, delivers the longest inaugural address in history, catches pneumonia, and dies 30 days later. He's president for 1 month. So Tyler, John Tyler, who was a Southern Democrat, who was put on the ticket to balance because Harrison was a Northerner and a Whig, so they were kind of doing a composite ticket. He's the first vice president to succeed. Now, all of these Whig big shots who had made Harrison their president thought this was in the Whig Party was going to really get control after all these years of the Jackson Democrats. Now they've got Tyler, who had been a Southern Democrat in the White House. That's not what they wanted. So they said, well, he's not really the president. He's just acting president. Because the Constitution is ambiguous. It says that in the event of the death of the president, the vice president shall act as president. So there was some argument. Tyler said, no, I'm the president of the United States. He moves into the White House. He takes the oath. He has the judge come and give him the presidential oath, and he delivers an inaugural address and calls himself Mr. President. He established the premise that when a vice president succeeds, he is the president of the United States. The next time it happened was 20 years later when Millard Fillmore Next time, the Whigs had terrible luck. They elected 2 generals to the White House, and they both promptly died in office. Harrison was a general, and Zachary Taylor was a general. Zachary Taylor goes to the dedication to the cornerstone laying of the Washington Monument on a hot day in the summer and consumes large quantities of iced fruit, as they described it. Comes down with a stomach ailment, and he's dead in a short period of time after that. So again, Millard Fillmore, who's this nobody politician from New York, becomes the president. Well, again, there was this flickering, well, he's not written. No, Fillmore said, no, we've already established that. I'm the president. He moves into and by that time it was settled. That settled it for all future times. If a vice president succeeds, he's not just the acting president. He's not a he's the president of the United States. So anyway, John Tyler deserves a little bit of a shout out because he established the fact that vice presidents do indeed become president of the United States.
Very good.
Very interesting.
One other little historical note, too, thinking about presidential candidates who might have been a little bit like Donald Trump with their background, nothing in government, just businessmen. This man gave FDR a pretty good run for his third term in office. If he had become president, he might have been something like Donald Trump, that Wendell Willkie.
Wendell Willkie.
Business background. He never had a public office.
Never held public office.
Yeah.
Willkie came close because after all, Roosevelt was running for a third term. No president had ever served 3 consecutive terms. Grant had sought the nomination 4 years after he left office. Grant sought the nomination, which would have been a third term, didn't get the Republican nomination, so it had never really come up before. So Willkie had a shot, and as you say, he did better than Hoover or Landon had done against FDR.
Yes. Well,
He was a
nowadays,
businessman, and it was a former Democrat. He was a former Democrat who got the Republican nomination.
so nowadays you can only serve 2 terms.
Right.
But after a break in service, so to speak, can you return for another term?
No, they covered that. It's 2 terms as president, and that's it. Whether
Or
they're
10
consecutive,
years.
you cannot serve more than 2 full terms, or as you say, 10 years. Gerald Ford could have run for 2 terms. If Gerald Ford had been elected when he ran in '76, he could have then run again in 1980 because he only served about a year and a half of Nixon's term.
But he was never elected president.
No, but I'm
But
saying
he had it so many years.
But I'm saying you cannot serve more than a maximum of 10 years as president.
Right.
So if for example, if a president succeeded the existing president and served 2.5 years of that term, then he could only run for 1 more term, because the next term would take him over the 10-year limit.
You know, and another interesting fact, you're talking about interesting facts of presidents, General Grant, Galena, they have, I believe, on their Welcome to Galena home of,
U.S. Grant.
U.S. Grant. There are 7 other Civil War generals from the city of Galena.
Right.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
What?
And the reason I know that is their marching band, Galena High School, when they used to march in parades, they had 8 grown men, dressed and depicting all 8 generals from Galena. They marched in
Oh,
front
wow.
of the band in the parade.
And when Grant left for the Civil War, Grant had pretty much been considered washed up when he was in Galena in 1860. He had served he was a West Point graduate, served in the Army, served in the war with Mexico, was stationed out in California, and then he resigned his commission. And during the 1850s, he just kind of knocked around. He went to Missouri. He had a farm in Missouri. They called him a hard scrabble farmer. The farm failed. And he winds up in Galena where his father lived. He got a job working in his dad's general store. And everybody looked upon him in Galena as a failure. He had to, like charity, he had to get a job from his dad to make ends meet. Civil War begins. The United States is looking for trained soldiers, and here's a West Point graduate. He offered his services and was turned down. The first time he offered his services, he was turned down. But then they raised a regiment in Galena, and because he's a West Point graduate, he got to be the colonel of the regiment. They have a big parade for the regiment as it's leaving Galena to go off to the front. Grant's uniform hadn't been delivered yet. So he had to march in the parade in civilian clothes, carrying his satchel. He didn't even have an aide, just carrying his own satchel. The streets are dusty. He's marching. He gets to the parade late, and he's at the tail end of the soldiers marching. Everyone thought he was some bum that had just decided to get a little recognition by marching in the parade. 8 years later, he's the president of the United States. This is 1860. He quickly is commissioned a colonel. He's made a brigadier general. He becomes a major general, the 2-star rank. Congress revives the rank of 3-star general for him. He becomes the first 3-star general permanently since George Washington. And then after the Civil War, they create the rank of full general. He becomes the first American to wear 4 stars on his uniform. And in 1868, he's elected president of the United States. It's incredible. And with that, we go to our announcer.
We'll be right back after these messages of interest and importance.
Do you suffer from pain? Do you know someone that has constant pain of their low back, neck, shoulder, knee, or wrist? Have they tried medications, exercise, physical therapy, or chiropractic, and nothing seemed to make it better? Well, I may have your answer. Why not try a napropath? Hi everybody, this is Dr. Wayne Chickowitz, and I've been practicing 30 years treating pain. I'm board certified and hold a diplomate in pain management. For your convenience, we have 2 locations. In Cicero, 3602 South 61st Avenue, 708-656-7000, or in Villa Park at 122 West St. Charles Road, Suite 1A, 630-833-4007. Why not try a napropath and stop the pain today?
Now back to our show, John.
I'd like to say a little bit more. This is Janice Cacioppo. We're here with our February edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. We're in our highly clandestine and concealed bunker deep within the bowels of Cook County. We're deep underground.
John, have you been to the new cafeteria here?
Oh, did they finally open it? It's down the corridor,
right,
down corridor
right.
B.
Always
isn't it?
at the end. Try the beef stew. It's delicious.
Oh, I'm glad you told me that. We're sorry we can't invite you down. The day may come when we'll be able to open this to the public and give tours, but you're going to have to go through so many checkpoints that right now it's just too difficult. But
You won't have a beef with this too, though.
I wanted to say a little bit more about Ulysses S. Grant, because he's an Illinois president. And we have 4 presidents that have a tie to Illinois. Abraham Lincoln. We are the land of Lincoln. Lincoln was born in Kentucky. He grew up in Indiana, but then as a young man, 21 years of age, he moves to Illinois, and he makes his career here in Illinois. He serves in the General Assembly, serves as congressman, and is elected president. Ulysses S. Grant, born in Ohio, served in the Army, but lived for a time in Galena, where his father had a store. And then after the war, the people of Galena presented him with this beautiful home that is a museum now. And I had the pleasure of seeing that some years ago. Ronald Reagan, the only president to have been born in the state of Illinois. Reagan was born in a little town called Tampico in western Illinois and grew up in Dixon, Illinois. Both of those are museums now. And then moved on eventually to California and Hollywood and fame and fortune. And Barack Obama, who lived in Chicago and served in the Illinois General Assembly and served in the Senate from Illinois. I just want to say another couple of words about Ulysses S. Grant. Grant, if you look at Grant, he looks kind of like an old guy. I mean, I think most people would have the image that Grant might have been middle-aged, one of our older presidents, because of the beard. Grant was 46 years old when he became president of the United States. Grant was one of our youngest presidents.
I never would have guessed that.
And I would think most people would have. I always thought of him because you look at that full beard, he looks like an older guy.
I would have guessed 60.
He was 2 years older than John F. Kennedy when Kennedy became president. And we know Kennedy was the youngest man to be elected president of the United States. Grant was only 2 years older than JFK when he became president. He was a very young man, one of our youngest presidents.
Maybe the beard had something to do with getting him elected.
Well, the beard
That was
was
the fashion.
the fashion. I mean, you see all these
Yeah.
Civil War officers, they all have mustaches,
Would've made 'em look older.
mutton chops, beards.
Sideburns from
Yeah.
General
Burnside.
Burnside.
Ambrose Burnside gives us the term sideburns because Ambrose Burnside had these big, fluffy growths of hair on his cheeks.
Well, he was from Chicago, though, wasn't he? Burnside?
I don't think so. I'm not.
Or
I don't
Ill-
think
Illinois.
Burnside's a Chicagoan. I don't think so.
Okay.
John Logan, who was the founder of the Grand Army of the Republic, was an Illinois man.
GAR,
I don't think but Grant's an incredible for anybody who thinks that you're washed up. I mean, to go from being a complete failure in 1860 and 8 years later he's elected president of the United States. It's just an incredible story. And he's looked upon now as a pretty good president. His stature amongst historians is rising. People are recognizing, particularly his first term was very, very successful.
Did the Confederacy have a equal or to the GAR, Grand Army of the Republic?
Yeah, I think it's called the
UCV, I believe, something like United Confederate
United
Veterans.
Confederate. That sounds right. Yeah, sounds something
yeah.
like
Okay.
yeah. They
Because
had a big veterans organization of
the
Southerners.
GAR
Grand
became-
Army of the Republic.
became what?
I don't know.
Grand Army of the Republic.
I don't know.
But when they died, didn't it turn
It
over?
just terminated. I mean,
Okay.
it was. I imagine they may have had some group like Sons of the, but the GAR essentially came to an end when
Right.
there were no longer.
Because a
any.
lot of the old cemeteries,
Civil War
you
veterans.
see them. You see that on the gravestones.
Yeah.
GAR.
Grand Army of the
John,
Republic.
John, talking about Grant and his meteoric rise in 8 years, it says a lot for the consumption of alcohol.
There's another line, Lincoln. Everybody, Tom, you want to quote that? Were we on the? I don't think you weren't on the air when we did. Why don't you tell them the story about Lincoln?
Grant had the reputation for being a drinker, and supposedly someone said in a negative way, said to President Lincoln about his drinking, and Lincoln supposedly responded, "Find out what he drinks and send a case to all the rest of my generals."
That's right. And there's another thing he said after that, and that is he says, "I cannot spare this man. He fights." And Lincoln had gone through generals that were like McClellan, who were great organizers, but who just didn't have the will to get into combat.
Biggest criticism with McClellan was he knew how to drill, and he knew how to uniform, and he knew how to
Brilliant. He was brilliant.
But
in all those things.
actually getting into the nitty gritty of battle,
No.
that wasn't.
He had a case
that
of
wa-
the slows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't his
McClellan
thing.
would have made a great chief of staff. He would have been great as the
That's a good
chief of
point.
staff. He would have because he was great at. He created the army that Grant then won the war with. It was created by McClellan, but the problem is McClellan didn't know what to do with it once he had created it.
Right. What was Truman's? What did he do before he was vice president?
Captain of Battery D in the U.S. Field Artillery in the First World War, and that battery still exists in the U.S. Army today, and it's called the Truman Battery.
Did
Whatever
that,
unit, whatever division it's assigned to, it's called the
was
Truman Battery.
that enough to warrant him as
No, he
the
was
vice
the
president?
only elected. He was senator. Before that, he was a county judge in his home county in Missouri. And judge does not mean that he sat at a bench and tried cases. He wasn't in Perry Mason episodes. Judge was a county official. The judge was like probably equivalent to our president of the county board. He was the highest county official in that county, but he wasn't a courtroom judge. They just for some reason used that term as his title. From that, he was elected to the Senate. He was a United States senator, elected in 1934, I believe, and then re-elected to the Senate. He was the head of what they called the Truman Commission during the war because he went around inspecting the use of monies. He was concerned that the government was appropriating these enormous amounts of money for the military, and he wanted to see that it was well spent and wasn't wasted. And he held hearings around the country pointing out, corruption and waste and overspending, and developed a reputation for that as an honest guy who was looking out for the taxpayer's dime.
Right.
And that's probably one of the main reasons that FDR then picks him to be his running mate in 19.
Despite Truman's ties to one of the machine politicians of Missouri, Pendergast.
Tom Pendergast.
He's a senator from Pendergast, was often the title. Yeah.
And Pendergast was thoroughly corrupt, but
Yeah.
Truman was honest.
But
Truman was
Truman,
honest.
yeah,
They could
no
never
doubt.
pin they could never even suggest that Harry had taken a dishonest dime in his life.
So, supposedly, Truman was in Chicago, I think during Adlai Stevenson's second run, talking about Illinois politicians, failed politicians, second run for president. And they were at the Conrad Hilton, and Adlai said to Harry, I just can't understand why I'm not, more popular than I am. And supposedly Truman was standing by the window looking out on Michigan Avenue, and he's told him, he said, Adlai, you see that guy waiting for the bus on the corner down there? If you want to be president, that's the guy you got to get to, and you just can't get to him.
No.
And that was true. He had this like aloof,
He didn't have the common touch.
Yeah, right.
Did not have the common touch.
and maybe Donald Trump was listening to him, because that's who the guy that Trump gets to, the guy waiting on the corner.
And that's the difference, and I think that's the difference between Trump and Bloomberg, for example.
Right.
Because they call Trump the blue-collar billionaire. I mean, he came from a kind of a, he didn't come from a silver spoon in his mouth background. His father was well off, but they lived a middle-class life. They weren't living on a vast country estate
Right.
somewhere with servants, and he grew up in a more middle-class background.
Have you read the book, his book, The Art of the Deal?
No, I've heard about it. Haven't I?
Excellent. And people that say, like, of course, I hate to quote something that was stated on The View television program, because I heard, I don't watch that, but I think it was Joy Behar was saying, what did he ever, he's never accomplished one thing. He doesn't do. And I'm thinking, are you insane? I mean, haven't you driven by one of these huge buildings that has the name Trump on it? I mean, but serious. But that's a really an excellent book, and it talks about what he had to do. Again, talking about being a businessman and cutting deals, what he had to do to build that building, which I've been in New York. It's a gorgeous building, but it just shows how smart. Again, I know Barack Obama was much smarter than Trump.
Oh yeah. Well, smartest man that ever lived.
But,
Yeah.
who were you talking about?
Donald Trump.
No, I mean before.
Truman.
He,
Stevenson.
no,
Truman and Stevenson.
he was the mayor of New York. He's
Bloomberg.
Oh, Bloomberg.
How did he make his fortune?
Obama is doing commercials for him now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, those are old clips.
Are
I mean,
they old
Yeah,
clips?
that's
Yeah.
causing some controversy.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
okay.
Obama has not officially endorsed Bloomberg.
No, but you would think
Sure,
so.
But he's
You-
been
you-
running
you-
those
yeah.
like he has.
Yes.
The commercial would lead you to believe that he is
Right. But
endorsed.
Obama has not come out, or any of his spokespeople come
No.
out and said, "Oh, I haven't endorsed." So,
Do we know how
Right,
Bloomberg made his fortune?
I think it was
He's richer than Trump.
Bloomberg.
so
I mean,
they
it was
say.
broadcasting. I think the Bloomberg News and
He's got a newspaper.
some of it is
Media,
some of it I
okay.
think. I don't honestly know, but
Yeah,
I do
I'd
know
like to hear it. Right.
broadcasting is part of it. Now, whether he
Okay.
got into that after he made his money,
I love one of his slogans. I think he's using it in Nevada. Bloomberg for Black America. I mean,
That's not going to work.
Mike will get it
I can
done. What
picture-
does that mean?
yeah, I can-
Mike will get
I-
it. What
yeah.
is it?
I can picture a bunch of blacks sitting around in a barber shop saying, "You know what we need? we need a billionaire Jew from New York to get on our side." Are you kidding me?
Speaking of judges, the Chief Justice, he was the first. It was his first time he ever presided over a trial.
You're talking about the impeachment?
For the impeachment trial, yeah. It
Robert-
was the
Roberts?
first. He was. It was the first time he ever
Trial?
presided over a trial, a bench
His
trial.
background.
It's conceivable. I guess you could be a judge because he was a judge before he became Chief
He
Justice.
was always,
Yeah, he was
never-
an appellate court.
appellate
so
court judges and
Maybe you mean
district
like a
court
criminal, a quasi-criminal trial.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure
prob-
about that. That's
that's
possible.
Yeah, it's probably true.
That's possible. Yeah.
And,
You know, FDR and Theodore Roosevelt were both wealthy men, but they had the common touch. You know, that's John Kennedy was an extremely wealthy man.
I'll tell you, I met Bill Clinton several times. You know, I used to ride the motorcycles for the motorcade, presidential motorcades, so
Yeah.
you meet a lot of people. And I'll tell you, Bill Clinton just had that. I mean, if somebody like him walked through that door, you would. He's just likable.
That's what
Light up
that's
the
what
room,
Newt
yeah.
Gingrich said. He says you can't dislike the man one to one. He's
Yeah.
he's a
Right.
terrific guy on an individual. I don't agree with 90% of what he wants to do, but
He
he's
just had
yeah.
that charisma.
yeah.
Uh,
Something that was not shared by his
and
spouse.
and again, oh yeah, God, what a disaster! Or as Bernie would say, what a disaster! You know, but,
This is huge.
but
It's the
but-
millionaires and the billionaires.
But
we're gonna get them.
But Bill knew in the waning hours of Hillary's campaign what she needed to do, and the campaign ignored.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And he
I've
even
heard that
said
he
if
gave them
doesn't-
good advice and they just brushed him
And
off.
he did that publicly. He said if she doesn't wake up or something, she's not going to win this.
Well, like you said earlier, they already had her elected.
Oh, yeah.
They were picking the cabinet.
Well, I remember they had the blue wall. Remember that was the blue wall. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and they were all in the bag. She didn't even have to campaign in those states because they were in the bag, and every one of them went for Trump.
Yeah, well, when Bernie gets the nomination and picks Hillary as his running mate, we'll get a and then Bernie mysteriously dies. Hey,
Well, there was
how's that for a conspiracy theory?
There you go.
There was
I
some,
envisioned that.
some kind of a deal too. If Clinton's wife died, she would quit the presidency, and he would run as a vice president, and then he would become the But then again, you got
You
the
heard
10.
this, yes.
You got the 10-year
yeah.
thing though too.
Yeah.
Though.
You know, I see. I think our producer wants to do. Were you about to join us in the discussion, John? Or
No, I was just gonna tell you, talking about Clinton. As you know, Ken Little's picture is sitting right there on the table there. He's got a son. One of his sons is Philip, and Philip was a maintenance manager for Fred Ike, the publisher of a big publisher downtown. And Fred and Bill Clinton were very, very, very dear friends. They're almost like brothers. And twice, Fred had invited Bill Clinton to come to his residence in the 800 block of Wrightwood. He has a big building over there. It's all concrete. It's a concrete building. There isn't a piece of wood in that place. And Phil had wanted me to go there as J&R Communications, name of my company that I had, to do some telephone and computer cable work there. So then it turned out to be that Phil had told me that they needed a PA system set up in the house for Bill Clinton to come to give a speech for a fundraiser. And the day we went there, we pulled in the alley with the van, loaded with PA system, the podium, microphones, speakers, amplifiers, and the whole 9 yards. And standing in the alley is the FBI. And I pull up, and the guy says, "Are you John?" I says, "Yes, I am." He says, he showed me the badge. He says, "We're from the FBI, or from Secret Service." He says, "We have to check your truck or check your equipment before you can bring it in the building." I said, "Help yourself, guys." So they open up the doors. They check the inside of the cabinets of the amplifiers and the case where I carry the microphones and everything in. And the guy says, "Okay, so you're clean." He says, "Go ahead and go in." So we carried in the podium. We carried in the speakers, the amplifiers. We set everything up. The microphone, John, that you're talking into, and the microphone that Dennis over there at the end of the table, Bill Clinton talked into those microphones.
These are presidential microphones.
That's right. The microphone that you're talking into right now, and the one that Dennis has got, those microphones were talked into by President Clinton, and the podium that I used at the cemetery, Clinton stood behind that podium.
I'm going to sit up straight now
Yeah.
whenever I speak
Okay.
into that microphone.
Now, about 2-3 years later, again, Fred wanted to have a fundraiser for I forget what the fundraiser was about, but anyways, so Phil again told me, he says, we want you to bring and set up the PA system like you did the last time. Clinton is coming back to town. I said, okay, fine. So again, the day of the speech, we go down there, and the guys from Secret Services, you're John, right? I says, I am. He says, we requested you to come back to set up the PA system. He says, you did such a great job, and you're clean. He says, we have no problem. Go to it. And again, that microphone, John, that you're on, and the one Dennis is in, Bill Clinton talked into those microphones.
Wow.
And I was well protected because on all the rooftops in that whole area around there was Secret Service standing up on the roofs, and we could see them standing. They were watching us and watching the area over there. So it was quite an honor. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to meet Bill Clinton because the day that he was there the first time, my son had his party. What do you call that party before you get married? Groom party, bachelor party. Bachelor party. Yeah. So I did not get a chance to meet Bill Clinton. But other than that, I was deeply involved with Bill Clinton.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, John, if it was a bachelor party, Clinton would have liked to have gone with it. if he had some strippers there,
Yep,
it would have been right up his alley.
Yeah, but it was quite an honor,
Yeah.
and
That's great.
to be there. Yeah, he stood behind the podium that I use. As in fact, the podium's in the garage right now, and that microphone, John, and one Dennis Fritz has got there. Those microphones, Bill Clinton talked into.
You should put on your truck, John, PA man to presidents.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
And that might hide some of the rust on it, John.
Visit the presidential microphones.
Yeah.
Museum material.
I'm glad they're down here in this bunker where they're well protected. And
Well, that's right. No one could get to these.
Well, we've been talking about a great deal of presidential history today. It's really appropriate for President's Day. We've talked about our current president and past presidents, and we've got a little over a half an hour yet to go on our program. Is there any other? Who else would like to enter into our discussion? Any other presidential anecdotes?
Yeah, the movie The Irishman. Anyone see it?
Heard of it? No, I haven't seen
No,
it.
not yet.
Well, see it. It's interesting. Of course, with Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro and some of these guys, they start out as these characters in their younger years, and as much makeup as they could put on them. They're not passing for 30 or 40 years old. But anyway, they kind of fit in at the end of the movie. But basically, it's a movie. The Irishman is Frank Sheeran, who was like the only Irishman involved in the Teamsters. It's basically about his relationship with Hoffa and the true story about how Hoffa got whacked and where his body wound up. But the reason that I brought it up about presidential elections is they talk so much, especially towards the end of the film, about the role that the outfit had in President Kennedy's election, organized crime. And one of the lines in the one of the main characters, Russell Buffalino, who was the Philadelphia, I believe, had a Philadelphia outfit, as referred to organized crime in Chicago. And there's a line that I thought was pretty interesting, because when they were talking about whacking Jimmy Hoffa, and they were talking to Hoffa, Frank Buffalino, about, you better listen to these people, the line they use, because the decision has been made, and it is what it is, meaning if you don't knock it off, meaning running for international president, you're going to get whacked. And Hoffa, the character in the movie, says, you're crazy. And the line that I said all that to say this is Buffalino said, hey, if they can whack a president, they can whack you. So getting back to, the assassination of President Kennedy and the mob influence, alleged mob influence in that, I thought was pretty interesting.
That's interesting, all right.
And especially how old man Kennedy and his relationship with organized crime, and then naturally they bring up the presidential election and the influence that Cook County had during the election.
Sure.
And then Bobby Kennedy, and how that was supposed to be straightened out. And again, I've seen interviews with the guy that wrote the book, and he interviewed this guy, the Irishman, and he says he believes that everything that he says, that there is physical evidence to show. I won't ruin it for you. Of course, you know that Hoffa got whacked, but I won't ruin the movie for you. But if you get a chance to see it, and again, how the presidential election was influenced by organized crime.
Wasn't there bad blood between Hoffa and
Teddy and Bobby
Bobby
Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Oh yeah. They hated
each other.
They hated one another, and supposedly they told Hoffa that they were going to take care of it. So
It's said that Hoffa wouldn't let them fly the flag at half-mast in front of the Teamster headquarters when John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah, that's in the film.
Something. Oh, is it? Always a talk of using the mob to help kill off Castro.
Oh yeah,
Remember?
Sure.
No. Wow.
So that takes us to a different side of presidential history in our country's long history. Couple of minutes, movies. Can anybody name an actor who portrayed Abraham Lincoln in the movies?
Raymond Massey.
Very good.
Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda, the two greats.
Yeah.
Can you name the films that they were in?
Young Mr. Lincoln.
That's Henry Fonda.
Oh, good question.
Massey's film is called Abe Lincoln in Illinois.
Is that right?
Abe Lincoln in Illinois.
That's trivia.
You could probably say that Abraham Lincoln, in his stovepipe hat and beard, is probably the most recognizable president. Maybe George Washington, but all the rest, kind of nondescript.
Yeah. Lincoln, sure, because
but that image of Abraham Lincoln.
The FDR with a cigarette holder. That,
oh yes,
I can't get away from that.
And when they did his statue in Washington D.C., he's there with his hand, and the lobby against smoking was too powerful. They couldn't portray him with that cigarette and the cigarette holder. So if you see the statue of FDR, he's obviously there to have the cigarette in it. But they couldn't permit it.
Talking about the smoking lobby, when they first put the warning label on cigarettes, the tobacco industry figured they had to counteract something through advertisement. True story. So they found someone who was like in his 80s from Kentucky, and he'd been smoking since he was 10 years old. So they were going to fly him to New York to do a commercial. And say, I've been smoking since for 70 years, and it doesn't bother me, and, the positive image on smoking. So they told him we're going to fly to New York, and he says, oh, yeah. He says, what time do you start filming them up there? And he says, well, we film pretty early in the morning. We start filming around 8 a.m. And I can't do that. And they said, why not? He says, I don't stop coughing till 10. It's supposedly a true story.
Who was the person who put Lincoln's name into nomination for president? He was a mayor of Chicago.
Well, that would probably be Long John Wentworth.
Yeah.
Long John Wentworth. Yeah. And they did it at a place downtown that was called the Wigwam. The Wigwam was the location.
From what I understand, they counterfeited
passes so that he
passes
could
to
pack,
get it so he could get elected.
so that he could pack the gal. They did the same thing in the 1940 Democratic Convention. They packed the galleries so that everybody could shout, "We want Roosevelt! We want Roosevelt!" They had what they called the voice from the sewers.
That's right.
They had the Chicago Commissioner of Public Works or Streets and Sand. One of those was with a microphone down in the lower depths. I think it was in the amphitheater. I think it was in the International Amphitheater, which is where they would have
Where's the
conventions.
stadium? I'm sure.
Might have been.
Yeah.
Somebody I think, but
Maybe
at the precise point, they killed all of the other mics, and all you could hear over the loudspeaker was, "We want Roosevelt! We want Roosevelt!" And that started the ban, because this was the third term, and they were they were still concerned about whether or not the convention would nominate any president, even FDR, for a third term.
He didn't get. He was very short in his fourth term before he died, though, wasn't
Well,
he?
he was only president for
A few
a little
months.
over a month.
Okay.
A couple,
Couple
because
months.
they had
Maybe
gone to
3 or 4
January.
months.
Yeah, because it used to be March, but
It
they
was
had
in
gone.
April
They had
he-
gone to January the 20th, and he
Right.
died on April the 12th.
Of 45.
So it was less than 3 months into his fourth term. What actor was best known for portraying FDR in the movies?
I'll say Ralph Bellamy.
Ralph Bellamy. Sunrise at
Campobello.
Yeah, does a
when
great.
he came down with his polio.
Great job. They did
movie.
they did a picture once where they wanted an actor to look like FDR in an advertisement here in Chicago, and they said that the actor that they got didn't look a great deal like FDR, but he bore a striking resemblance to Ralph Bellamy, and that's how he got the job. And now,
Do you know who played Eleanor in that movie?
Greer Garson,
Exactly.
Mrs. Miniver,
Very good.
Mrs. Miniver, yeah, one of my favorite actresses.
Movie trivia. Yeah.
And now for a word from our
my
announcer.
Goodness. It's time for our last brief intermission. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians.
Hello, friends. Do you need new tires for your vehicle? How are the brakes? Are they in good condition? How's your front wheel alignment? Do you need your tires rotated? How are the shocks and struts? Do you need an oil and grease change? How about a tune-up? When was the last time you had your engine tuned up? How about the wiper blades? Are they nice, sharp blades to clean off the rain and snow? How are the headlights, tail lights, stop lights, turn directional signals? Are all the bulbs working? How's your cooling system and the exhaust system? How about your battery? Does that need to be upgraded? How about the belts and hoses, fuel injectors, timing belt and chain, and the air conditioning? Is that all working properly? Well, if you need any maintenance work done on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Service, which is located at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. They are on Grand Avenue on the north side of the street, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue. You can't miss the building. There's a big Goodyear sign right on top of the building. Or you can call area code 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, or Ken will be more than happy to assist you and to help you with any questions you might have about the maintenance on your vehicle. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening. Saturday, from 7:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And even on Sunday, from 9:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So once again, for any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Supply. Once again, their address is at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. And their phone number is area code 773-622-4361. They have great service. Their mechanics are all certified mechanics, and they do quality work. Now, I've been going to Grand Tire with my vehicle since 1985, right up until this present day. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. Their phone number is 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, and Ken will be more than happy to help you and to advise you on any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. You can't miss the building because there's a big Goodyear sign on the top of the building. That's Grand Tire and Auto Service, 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, and their phone number is area code 773-622-4361.
Now back to our special edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. John?
Thank you very much, Rich. Well, we're in our wind-up 30-minute segment, our last half hour of our February edition. Like I mean, this month began with Groundhog Day. I'm always a great exponent of Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil. No February 2nd is complete for me until I get on the news. I get up, make sure I catch the news to see Punxsutawney Phil, whether he saw his shadow or not.
I always like to gauge the weather by advice from a member of the rodent family.
Absolutely. I mean, what could be more successful? I love seeing these guys in their top hats and their parchment proclamations.
And don't forget Woodstock Willie.
Woodstock Willie here in Illinois. But my dad was born on February the 2nd. I can remember my dad, every February 2nd, my dad would look up, he'd say, "What's the name of that groundhog in Pennsylvania?" And I'd say, "Punxsutawney Phil." My dad would chuckle, "Yeah, Punxsutawney Phil." Folks, I want to take just a few minutes now to talk about one of the most important events of the 20th century, and the 75th anniversary of it is coming up this week. We're broadcasting on the 17th of February. 75 years ago, February the 19th, 1945, the United States 4th and 5th Marine Divisions landed on a little volcanic rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Iwo Jima. If you've ever seen the John Wayne movie, The Sands of Iwo Jima, you've seen a very graphic depiction of what took place there. Right. It was one of the most bloody battles Americans have ever engaged in. It began on the 19th of February. The island of Iwo Jima, which is just that, it's just a rock. It had been pounded from the air. It had been bombarded by American battleships and cruisers with their big guns. But the Japanese were so dug into this island that much of their firepower survived. And for nearly a month, the Marines fought to gain control of Iwo Jima. On the fourth day of the battle, on the 23rd of February, 1945, they reached the crest of one of the most significant features on this rock, Mount Suribachi, which I believe is on the southern tip of the island. And Marines and one Navy corpsman raised the American flag on that Mount Suribachi. An American correspondent named Joseph Rosenthal from the Associated Press captured it with a photograph. And that was the iconic, that's an overused word, but it is appropriate for this. It was the most celebrated photograph of World War II. It's the photograph that symbolizes America's struggle in World War II, the famous shot of these American GIs raising the Stars and Stripes on Mount Suribachi. It was recreated in the John Wayne film with several of the actual Marines who had been involved in the battle were actually there in that scene for the movie. It was turned into a monument at Arlington Cemetery, which for many years was considered the nation's World War II memorial. It was a bloody engagement. 22,000 Japanese were either killed or captured. 21,000 Americans were casualties. Out of that, 4,500 were killed. There were 4,500 Marines who died on Iwo Jima, about another 500 missing, and more than 15,000 wounded. 15,000 men wounded to win control of this rock. Many of the films, and we've all seen the picture, they don't really indicate why. Why did we fight such a bloody battle to get this little desolate rock? Well, there's a reason for it. We were already beginning to bomb Japan. We had taken the Marianas Islands. Guam, the U.S. possession, was one of the Marianas Islands. We were flying the great B-29s, the most powerful aircraft of World War II, these huge four-engined American B-29 super fortresses. We're flying from the islands of Saipan and Tinian in the Marianas, about 1,500 miles from the Japanese home islands. We had begun the bombardment of the Japanese home islands. Iwo Jima was about midway between the Marianas and Japan, about 750 miles from Tokyo, 700 miles from the Marianas. So it would make an excellent midpoint between that route. The Japanese were using it to spot the waves of American bombers. It was like an early warning base for the Japanese that the American B-29s were coming. By taking it, we would deprive them of that. We would be able to put fighter planes. You could put airstrips on Iwo Jima for fighter planes. So our fighters could then escort the bombers into Japan and give them additional protection. The B-29 bristled with machine guns. It was a heavily armored and armed plane, but this would give it the added protection of American fighter aircraft, the P-51 fighter aircraft. Also, it would mean that any disabled B-29s returning would have a stop-off before reaching all the way back to the Marianas. They would have a shorter stop to land on Iwo Jima if the plane was in bad condition and maybe not able to make it all the way back to Tinian or to Saipan. So it had all these reasons, and that's why we expended all this blood in order to secure Iwo Jima. And it comes at a time when battles are still going on in the Pacific on the island of Luzon. I mentioned last time about how my dad was in the invasion of the island of Luzon. At this time, 75 years ago, Americans were fighting in Manila. They had reached Manila on the 3rd of February, and they were fighting street by street and building by building to remove the Japanese from Manila. So that great struggle on the island of Luzon in the Philippines was going on. In Europe, the Battle of the Bulge had just come to a close, the bloodiest battle in the European theater of World War II. So this was a critical time. 1945 was when it was all coming together. The final defeat of Germany in Europe, the final defeat of Japan in the Pacific. But that Battle of Iwo Jima is something that to this day resonates with Americans. There were actually a few soldiers, there were actually a few Army troops, which I wasn't aware of this, and I did a little research. There were some small Army units at Iwo Jima, anti-aircraft units, port soldiers that were assigned to port facilities. So there were a very small number of Army forces on Iwo Jima, but of course it was overwhelmingly the United States Marines. And it's something that we should as Americans, we should be proud of this because it was one of the finest hours. You know, there are some that say that that the United States, that we won the war with overwhelming firepower and weaponry and equipment, and that's all true. And it's to our advantage because we used our weaponry and our ability to produce tanks and planes and aircraft to drown our enemies in war production. But the heroism of the GI, the heroism of the American soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman of World War II is attested to by what those Marines accomplished on Iwo Jima. And they deserve the credit John Wayne gave to them in that film, and they deserve to be remembered today. Donna just give me a printout. You can see a view on the internet of Mount Suribachi and of what Iwo Jima looks like today, and it's just a rock. I mean,
it's a little pebble in the ocean. Doesn't even look like there's a like it's inhabited.
You may remember. I don't believe it is. I don't believe anyone lives there. You may remember the line in the movie where one of the Marines says, "When God finished creating the world, He must have taken all the dust and rubbish that was left over and dumped it here." So remember that we're in the final months now of the 75th anniversary of World War II. It'll come to an end in May with the anniversary of VE Day, and then August and September with the final defeat of Japan. But then when you see that picture of the GIs raising the Stars and Stripes on Mount Suribachi, that happened February the 23rd, 1945, 75 years ago this week.
Right. The only thing that would come close to it would be 9/11 with the firemen raising that flag.
Yeah, and you had that odd thing when you see the firemen raising the flag at 9/11, and it looked so much resembled the flag raising at Mount Suribachi.
Some of the papers, they had both of them on the front
right.
page.
I've got a plaque. Someone gave me. I've got a plaque.
Yeah, I've got one of those too.
Of the flag. I had the opportunity to meet some of the firefighters from New York. They came to our town because the town had donated things when they needed supplies and so forth in New York. We had donated, and they sent the New York Fire Department sent firefighters out, and I had a chance to meet some New York firefighters. They even gave me a pin from their detachment, their
Engine
unit.
55.
Yeah,
they were in Oak Park too.
And you know, John, when some people wonder why some of us get so upset when someone doesn't stand
Right.
for the national anthem, or stand for the American flag, or desecrate the American flag, obviously they don't know anything about the history of this country and the sacrifices that Americans have made to, in situations like this, to raise the flag. It's extremely upsetting, and also these are the same people that can't understand how Donald Trump got elected president.
Right.
Do a little research and learn a little bit about the history of this country and the sacrifices that people have made, and then you'll understand why people get upset about the actions that you take.
The Americans who died, the Americans who were injured for the rest of their lives, who came, those that came away alive but with the loss of an arm or a leg, all done to protect the American flag, to defend the American flag.
Exactly.
When I was a young man going to school, even through college, often the argument was made, it was immoral for us to have dropped the A-bomb on Japan.
But what they don't...
I just want to say, but
Okay.
the more you think through that, a lot of lives were saved on both sides
Right.
by us dropping that A-bomb.
It would have been immoral not to
Yes,
use
I think the
A-bomb
president could have been
on Japan.
impeached if he had a weapon of war that would have hastened the end
Can
of
you
it.
imagine
Yeah.
if he had chosen not to use it, and then they invaded Japan and lost 100 or
That was the
200,000
prediction.
Americans,
Through 46 into 47.
killed maybe 10 million Japanese? God knows how many Japanese would have died fighting to the last ditch.
Yeah.
And I like to say I have a personal interest because my dad was sitting with the 6th Infantry Division on the island of Luzon, and his division was being refitted for the invasion of Japan. And my dad would have been in the invasion of Japan, which means it is conceivable that I would not be here today speaking into this microphone.
That's right.
So no one will ever convince me that Truman made the wrong decision by
And
dropping the bomb.
you know,
And,
it just goes to show the difference in the attitude of the country. During the war, Curtis LeMay ran bombing strikes in Japan that were applauded.
Well,
That were applauded.
in
And
the
now you take out one terrorist, Islamic terrorist, and they're up in arms.
That's right. And a lot of people don't believe the bombing of Tokyo in the spring killed more people
Then the atomic bomb.
But both of the atomic bombs,
Yeah,
right?
those firestorm raids over Tokyo killed maybe 100,000 or
yeah,
more,
yeah.
which is more than died at either
Both of them
Hiroshima or
combined, yeah.
Nagasaki.
The only thing not known in those days was the deaths caused by radioactivity.
Yeah.
And that
would
was
still
wasn't
pale
that
to
Curtis,
the overall casualty rate.
General Curtis LeMay.
Curtis Emerson LeMay.
And
yeah.
talking about presidential elections, Curtis LeMay was the running mate of George Wallace
Right.
That's true.
when
Right.
he ran for president.
Wasn't
LeMay-
one of his quotes, "Let us bomb Vietnam back to the Stone Age"?
Right.
He was the man that built the Strategic Air Command. I mean, he built our strategic bombing forces in World War II, and then after the war, it became the Strategic Air Command. I mean, this was a great patriot. And when you think about how many Americans would have died if we had not used the atomic bomb,
Right.
if we had not used it, and then the public had found out we had this secret weapon sitting, and we didn't use it, and you sent all those men off to their deaths,
Yep.
my God, it's inconceivable that a president would not.
And there's so many. I heard a story about a Japanese citizen who was on the island, the first bombing, survived that bombing, and was on the next island and survived that. He survived both of the bomb drops.
Sure.
You know, it was surprising. Oops, I'm sorry. It was surprising too, the outrage when President Trump had rightfully so killed that Soleimani, the chief mastermind of these bombings, had killed and injured so many of our troops, and didn't belong in that country at all. And during that time is when they were attacking our embassy. He was no doubt orientated to march in a parade of celebration once our embassy was toppled, like it was in Benghazi, you know. But here people, and some of our elected leaders, can you believe it, come to his defense. Oh, he was a statesman, a representative of other people. I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable.
Well, that's another thing that Trump really has brought respect back to this country. I know Laura Ingraham, one of her lines was when she said when Obama was president, she said, I long for the days when countries around the world hated us. Now they just laugh at us.
That's a good line.
But he has the
respect it.
backbone to do what's necessary. He done it there. And what was that other incident in Syria with the poison gases? And he launched 59 missiles and took out those planes and their hangars and all that. And as he was meeting with the president of China, you know, and he does what has to be done.
He reminds me of that line that I quoted of Lincoln about Grant when he said, "I cannot spare this man. He fights." And that's what separates Donald Trump from some of the previous leaders of the Republican Party, is that he understands what politics is all about. Democrats understand what politics is all about. They play to win. But so many Republicans, unfortunately, they want everybody to love them. They want to be popular with them. They don't want to offend anybody. And Trump understands that you have to take a position and defend it and fight for the position you believe in.
That's when they talked about when some elections that they lost. They said we have to open up the Republican Party. We have to have what's it called, a big tent, and invite all in. That proved to be totally false.
No.
You concentrate on your support, and win with the support you have. We don't have to bring anybody else in.
Democrats understand that there's 45% of people who are never going to vote for them. And they don't waste a lot of time trying to win those people over. If you're pro-life, Democratic Party doesn't spend any time trying to persuade you to come over to their side. If you support the Second Amendment, you don't see the Democrats reaching out to the NRA or to people that support, the right to own firearms.
Right. To reach out to transgender and transsexual, the population, it's so small of a demographic that they can't even calculate. But it's less than 1%, and you're reaching out to these people.
It's unbelievable. You know, with the changing of public washrooms to unisex washrooms, things like that. How on earth could they have such a following to do that? But the numbers are minuscule.
But they don't. That's the thing. That's why they underestimated Trump, because they didn't think that he would have. And people were just flat out fed up.
And that's why Trump enrages them, because they've tried every trick in their book, and it hasn't gotten rid of him. I'm sure they thought he would have been gone by now. He would have resigned. He would have
For
been
sure.
impeached.
The Russia
It
influence.
just doesn't work.
Here's what I always ask about the Russian influence. Please, let's hear from the people that were influenced to switch their vote. I mean, like I said, I was going to vote for Hillary until I got the phone call
from Putin.
No, the phone call that said this is Ivan. You will vote for Trump. Because up until that time, I was going to vote for Hillary.
It was in the bag.
I mean,
yeah.
it's ridiculous, really.
Do we think Trump might keep Pence on the ticket?
Oh yeah.
Well, very likely
I
so,
don't think
based on.
Yeah.
Pence,
another-
loyal. Yeah.
Another, I don't know if you know it, but Phil Pence's uncle was a Chicago police officer.
Is that
Oh,
right?
really?
For Pete's sake, never knew that.
Oh yeah,
Huh?
I know. He was a friend of mine.
Well, wasn't he the
As a matter of
governor
fact, he
of
was,
Indiana?
Oh, he's close to Indiana. I mean, that's very close.
Phil Pence, and every time I see him, I haven't seen him in a while, but I always tell him. He looks at me and says, "You don't have to tell everybody that." But I tell him, I says, "You know what this guy's claim to fame is? He was Harold Washington's only white pallbearer." and he was.
Interesting.
He was on Harold's detail. Harold had two white Chicago police officers on his detail, and Phil was one of them.
I'll be darned.
Nice
That's
guy.
something.
And that's his. As a matter of fact, Mike Pence talks about coming to Chicago and seeing
I'll
his
be
an
darned.
Uncle
Yeah,
Phil.
that kind of rings a bell. Maybe I heard some
Yeah.
reference to that.
But the next 4 years, boy, he gets in there. So many things he can deal with, and I know his list is long, but go back into your opening statements. This is divine intervention. This is maybe a miracle in progress. How he could have withstood all of this, but he stands strong. He's a workaholic.
And it exposed
Yeah.
the liberal left actually as what they are.
Oh.
They criticize us for being intolerant, but they are the most punching someone in the face because they're wearing a red hat.
Yeah,
I mean, are you kidding me?
yeah.
And I remember some of these so-called conservative thinkers and leaders who have said, well, Trump, he's not a real conservative. Look at what he's done. His appointments to the Supreme Court. He's put more than 150 federal judges on the bench, the district court and the appellate court, rebuilding the military, asserting a strong American foreign policy. We're not going to... He's doing everything that conservatives always preached but never actually achieved when they got into office.
Trade negotiations.
It's second chance program too with the prison population. Anybody can make mistakes, this, that, and the other, but he's willing to give them a second chance. They worked on that for like 40 years in the past. He brought it to fruition.
Right.
So many things, historic things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got just a few minutes to go. Are there any other closing words that anyone would like to present? Go around the table. Rich, you have any thoughts? How are you? You got your old-time radio. Doing any
I've got trivia
performances?
for you, John.
Okay, good.
You brought up before actors who played Abraham Lincoln in the movies. I've got another one, fairly well known, playing him some years before either Massey or Henry Fonda.
Well, that was Jason Robard Sr. portrayed Lincoln in a movie called Lincoln, a silent film made about in the late 20s.
Okay, there's a early
Jason Robard
30s.
Sr.
Walter Houston played
Well,
Lincoln.
I've never seen that. I could see
Griffith
him.
movie, one of his
Okay.
few sound movies.
Okay.
Walter Houston. I'm not sure if the movie was called Lincoln or Abraham Lincoln.
Jason Robards Jr.
That's interesting.
portrayed Lincoln in a TV movie about Gettysburg, about the
Is that right?
Gettysburg Address. Yeah, I think it was called Lincoln at Gettysburg. And of course, Sam Waterston was well known in I guess that was in the 80s or the 90s. They had a big mini series on television. Mary Tyler
Blue and the
Moore
Gray,
played Mary Todd Lincoln. So there have been a number of actors that have portrayed. But everybody, there was a time when everyone thought of Raymond Massey and Henry Fonda. And the story is that they did a recreation on TV in the 50s, a live TV broadcast of Abe Lincoln in Illinois with Raymond Massey recreating the role of Lincoln. And it ends with Lincoln's been elected president. He's on the train going to Washington. He gives his farewell address to Springfield. He said, I may never see this town again, which proved to be quite true. And one of the extras in the TV cast was Ted Knight. Ted Baxter from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and they
He
were all
was credited with this? I didn't know that.
yeah, they were all supposed to say goodbye, Mr. Lincoln. That was as the train pulled away, and as the camera kind of pulled away, they were all saying goodbye, Mr. Lincoln. And Ted Knight, poor Ted Knight, got a little carried away, and he said, "Goodbye, Mr. Massey. Goodbye, Mr. Massey." And this went out over the live TV, went out over the airwaves.
Could Ted Knight ever have lived that down?
Or up.
boy. Let's
So we've
see.
talked about
Presidents in the movies.
You know, if I don't know if it's appropriate or not, I would like to,
sure.
as we conclude the station, referencing our patriotic organization in our upcoming event. As you know, we're going to be celebrating our 22nd anniversary on the 14th of May. And any and all are welcome. Those tickets are available. And support of our honorees is available, too, on our website. That's knights12173.us. Please write it down. This is a good organization to support. And we're very proud of the 14-plus charities that we support that come just from our council. So to be a member of this or to support this is a good thing. And that's at knights12173.us. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am a Knight of Columbus. I am a 4th degree Knight of Columbus, so I heartily endorse this very worthy and, very, as you say, patriotic. And the 4th degree is called the patriotic degree of the Knights of Columbus. So it always
You honor us with your membership. And I know across the table from me, Tommy McKenna is
Also 4th degree
Ah.
knight.
Yes, he is. That's right. This, I'll tell you what, having mentioned that, this February 22nd, listen to this. Last year, we set a record. We had 27 members just from our council. That number is unheard of. This is out in Lisle. This February, we have 53 from our council advancing to 4th degree.
Wow.
very good.
That is unheard of. That photo will go national in publications. We are ever so proud of that. Our honoree, Nick Sposato, is going to be 4th degree, and so many others. But, we get results in our council.
The sad thing is, forgive me for saying this, is they'll never get to know the joy of wearing the traditional uniform with the cape and the chapeau.
You hit a live note there. That's true.
Yeah.
What a shame. Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have had you here. We'll be back next month with our March edition, our Lenten edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. And now for the final closing words from our announcer, Rich Lang.
We want to thank the executive producer of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, John Seconda. Recordings of previous Meet the Chicago Historians programs are available for your listening pleasure via the internet at www.windycityhometown.com. On behalf of everyone associated with our Historians program, we thank you for listening. This is your announcer, Rich Lang. So long until next time.
You have been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Monday, February the 17th, the year 2020. This broadcast was produced and directed by John DeVita, and our special thanks to the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. This program was pre-recorded on Monday, February the 17th, the year 2020. Until next time, friends, please be safe and thanks for listening.